Welcome, everyone, to the Remembering the Truth of Who We Really Are event. This event was created by Jocelyn Mercado and hosted by her, and I am Dr. Taria Ward. I'm your co-host and your host for today's interview with Kedar Brown. I'm so excited to introduce Kedar to this audience. He's a friend and an amazing ceremonialist and ritualist. I'll read his bio in a moment, but welcome, Kedar. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Tori. It's wonderful to be here with you, and looking forward to this hour and having a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is going to be great. So for those who don't know Kedar, I will read his bio right now. Kedar lives in Asheville, where I live, so this is nice. Kedar is a ceremonialist, a healer, a diviner, an intuitive, and a teacher of psychological and spiritual awareness with over 32 years of professional experience. Over this time, he has developed an effective and unique approach to emotional and spiritual healing by braiding together his depth of clinical knowledge of experiential psychotherapies with more nature-based indigenous wisdom teachings and healing methods from around the world. Kedar is the founder and director of Rites of Passage Council. He is known for his ability to blend many creative and expressive forms of depth psychology with more shamanic methods of healing through various initiatory rites and rituals, remote healing work, and clearing of ancestral turmoil. In 1994, Kedar apprenticed with Stephen Foster and Meredith Little at the School of Lost Borders in the pan-cultural form and process of the Vision Quest ceremony and eco-psychology. He apprenticed with Malidoma Some, PhD, an initiated elder and shaman of the Dagara tribe of Burkina Faso in West Africa, in uses of indigenous methods of healing emotional trauma and relationship challenges through various forms of ritual processes and cowrie shell divination readings. Kedar has also had the honor and privilege to spend many years apprenticing with Cherokee elder and medicine person Will Rocking Bear. Kedar is a licensed professional counselor, licensed clinical addiction specialist, nationally certified counselor, a certified Hakomi body-centered psychotherapist. Kedar's healing retreats and training programs are offered both nationally and internationally. His previous work has taken him across the US and into Ireland, West Africa, England, Australia, Scotland, and Hawaii. And Kedar's topic for today is Awakening the Indigenous, the Rewilding of Human Nature and the Great Turning. Wow, Kedar, so nice to have you. I am looking forward to all that you have to share with our audience today. Just to begin with, why don't you tell us about yourself and what brought you to the work that you're doing today?
All right, thank you, Taria. Before I jump into that, I offer my deep gratitude to my teachers, some of those whom you have mentioned, and their teachers and the teachers before them, and the lineage of teachings in medicine that has been conveyed to me. So I have a lot of gratitude for that medicine and those lineages of the medicine from which it comes.
Beautiful.
Also, I offer gratitude to my ancestors and ancestral helping spirits that stand by me as I kind of navigate my way through this world. Mm-hmm. So how did I get into this? It's often a question I get asked, and I try and keep the answer really short. So I'm going to keep it extra short today. Let's say born on the heels of two ancestors who died early in life, and I got their two names, Kedar and Stevenson. And then fast forwarding to my father's death in '92, and what happened to me at that time is there was a reawakening of a longing to go into the wilderness under the guidance of an initiated elder. I didn't have that language at 13, but I could pretty much describe what's known as a vision fast or walkabout or vision quest ceremony to people. And I knew that I wanted to do that. And so nobody knew about that in my world. So that went underground at 13. And when my father died, it rose back up. and I found myself in the midst of a calling. Now, callings can take many forms. Sometimes they can be quite treacherous. Unfortunately, mine wasn't so treacherous, but it involved several non-ordinary reality experiences of seeing covered wagons with the word Vision Quest written on it. When I came out into a parking lot one day, they were really there. Some people said, "Were you imagining?" I said, "No, they actually were there." Another incident of my father coming to me in a dream right after he died, and he pulled a book off the shelf and he gave it to me, and I looked at the book and it said Vision Quest. Now, he sold Mack trucks. This really wasn't his world while he was alive, but in that dream time, he blessed me with that remembering, and it set me on this longing to complete this initiatory passage that first rose up in me when I was 13. There were other things that happened to eventually get me on the mountain with Stephen Foster, Meredith Little back in 1994, out in the Sierra Nevada mountains around 9,000 feet. And the last night of my quest, I was sitting on the mountain looking at the moon. And it occurred to me that that night was September 20th, 1994. And it was...
Kedar?
Yes.
I'm going to interrupt you just for a minute because there are people who are having trouble hearing you. So okay. I think you need to get closer to the mic. So before you get into that part of your story. And I did forget to mention, I'm sorry that I forgot to mention, people please sign in and welcome to everyone. And we'd love to see you showing up in the chat and telling us who you are and where you're from and so forth as we're getting started here. Sorry, I forgot to mention that, but it's so nice to see you showing up. And Kedar, everyone wants to hear every word. So apparently it's been a little, the volume's a little dim. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. So I hope you remember right where you were.
I'll remember.
Ready to tell that story.
So yeah, I ended up on the mountain with Stephen and Meredith some 2 years later. As I say, it was the last night of my quest was September 20th, 1994. And it occurred to me in that moment, sitting on that mountain, that it was 2 years to the exact moment that my father had died.
Oh, wow.
Landed me on that mountain. So that's a really short story that could have been much longer, but for this purpose, wanted to shorten it. And then when I came down off the mountain, I knew that I was in love with this ceremony called Vision Fasting, Vision Quest. And I began to apprentice myself to the medicine of that work. And then my other teachers that over the years, Will Rocking Bear and Aldama Some, they added a deeper and broader awareness of the rituals and ceremonies and medicine that became part of that. So that's a little bit about how I got here. Along with all of that, my background in clinical work and all the experiential psychotherapies, when I was around 28, I began to blend the clinical knowledge with the indigenous perspective of healing. When people ask me sometimes, well, do you blend the shamanic work with your clinical work? And I said, I used to. Now I tend to blend a little bit of the clinical with the shamanic because it's kind of gone that way. So it's helpful having both lenses and perspectives and working with people. So that's some of how I got here. The title, Reawakening the Indigenous, the Rewilding of Human Nature and the Great Turning, is something that my work has become much more passionate about engaging, working with people with the awareness of, what's going on globally in the world, what's needed, and what does initiatory passages have to do with that?
Right.
Why would those are things that interest me. Good.
Yeah, before I ask the next question, if anybody still can't hear, would you put so in the chat? But I think the sound is much better now, so I want to be able to.
My screen a little bit here.
Yeah. So I think everyone can hear you now, Kedar.
And I'll speak.
So I've heard you talk about how your work is more about initiatory descent than ascent, although it certainly includes both, but I love how you articulate that. If you would talk more about the rites of passage and the work of the initiatory rites to help us to descend into, well, you say it.
Yeah, so if you think about life as at least in a linear way, beginning at birth,
Mm-hmm.
at least in our lifetime, ending at death, it follows this linear passage from birth to death.
Mm-hmm.
Initiatory passages run opposite the flow of life in that they begin with a death, a ceremonial death, and they end with a birth. So the initiatory passage or soul descent, or you can think in terms of there are initiations of fire, which we generally consider an ascent, and there are initiations by water, which is generally a descent. So an ascent is an initiation into spirit, into higher frequencies of awareness and unified consciousness. And the initiatory descent into the realm of water, archetypically, is into soul, into
Mm-hmm.
ancestry, into memory, into healing, into reconciliation. It's the roots of the ancient tree that go down, those ancestral roots, and traveling down in ways of healing and remembering. In indigenous culture, different than Western culture, there's a paradigm of thinking that has to do with how we come into the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen this in several different cultures with the presence of a medicine name that one acquires shortly after birth when they would go live with an elder or a grandparent. And that is that the understanding that you come here from the world of the ancestors, and you would have made agreements with certain ancestors that carry a similar frequency of medicine that you carry. And you simply come here because you have a gift that you are bringing the community. I would say the human and non-human community. Mm-hmm. And so when you arrive here with this gift and those connections to certain ancestral platforms of power or medicine, staying connected to that and delivering the gift from which you have come here to offer becomes the primary focus. Mm-hmm. So that we could say that when your life is in turmoil, it generally means that you have become misaligned with the medicine gift that you carry.
Oh.
Delivery of it. And so that realignment with identity and belonging in the way in which you belong to the world, as David White would say, is where you, as Meldoma said to me one time, when you're aligned with the delivery of your medicine, you don't show up on the obstacle of the radars as easily. Mm-hmm. When you focus on obstacles, you just get more obstacles. So this way of aligning yourself to this, to the delivery of the gift that you are, the medicine that you came here to offer, and bringing that into the world. And so in indigenous culture, that's an understanding that you have come here because you have brought us a gift. Mm-hmm. And our job as the village is to kind of pull that out of you because we know it's in there. Help you stay connected to it through certain rites and rituals and ceremonies.
Beautiful.
So it's just a context for understanding a difference in indigenous culture. In Western culture, it's more that you're born, and what you're born with is certain aptitudes and eventually interests. And those aptitudes and interests are then aligned with the cultural values, and then the cultural tells you what we want you to do.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with our society's values, if you want to know the values of a culture, you just look around and see what the tallest buildings are, and that will tell you what they value.
Oh,
And so we have in our society, we've grown to value the economic structures and the consumeristic structures of society, and have lost the real soul connection. And people generally aren't willing to do that initiatory dive, that soul work.
Mm-hmm.
And as I tell people, one time somebody asked me, so, well, if I didn't know that I needed to do this, could I actually not do it? And I said, no, doesn't work that way. You'll either do it voluntarily or involuntarily, but you will be going down to the river.
Mm-hmm.
And it can happen through chaos and turmoil, through ceremonial awakenings. There's an old Irish Celtic proverb that says that the troubles in this world can only be healed by the other world. And the troubles in the other world can only be healed in this world. And so there's an applied reciprocal relationship of healing that's necessary. And that community includes the not only human but non-human, and not only the living but the ancestral. That's how communities understood in indigenous life. So that they say the ancestors are thirsty, and what they're most thirsty for are the tears of the living, because it helps them heal. And as they heal, then they help us heal. So again, this reciprocal connection with ancestors, that's hugely important in the remembering and these initiatory rites and passages.
Kedar, if you can get a little closer to the mic, there's still just a little bit of volume difficulty, and especially when you're drumming, I think if you put the drum to your side instead of between us and the mic.
Okay.
Because I know you have a wonderful story.
Yeah, I'll arrange it, and we'll do a little test before we start off.
All right, great. Yeah, let's do that so everybody can be sure to hear it. But there's a lot going on in the chat you can look at later. People are really enjoying the stories you're telling and really aligning with it. So it's lovely. So I want to know, certainly people start to realize that there is an initiatory descent to be made in order to find our own particular gift. So how does one set themselves on that path? What are the ways that you would recognize or advise that people set themselves on the path to really find their own unique gift, talent, who they really are, what they really have to offer, and approach that?
The path will find them.
Yes.
And it will more like it stalks you until it corners you.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to look far. Maybe just turn your attention to where the most trouble seems to be, and that might be the doorway of initiatory descent.
Okay.
I want to say something about children and elders. I was thinking about this earlier. The one thing children and elders have is in common is they both have a foot in the other world. That's why they get along so well. That's why they need each other, children and elders. And so this initiatory descent calling, awakening, doesn't show up so much for the elder or for the child. It's in that middle zone for the rest of us that these things come to awaken us. Because once the elder places a foot in the other world and the child having just arrived here, their attention is divided that way. But for the rest of us, these passages of soul descent, to begin to look at, first to begin to, I guess I would say, notice the areas of life that would rather you didn't do this. A lot of our religious traditions are much more focused on ascent. And the trouble with that is it leads toward a lot what I call spiritual bypass. You
Mm.
know, this a tendency to want to seek out the higher frequencies of awareness before you've gone down to the river.
Mm.
And so beginning to read trouble or obstacles much more mythologically than pathologically. That would be a first step.
Mm.
So when you look at difficulty and challenge from a mythological context,
Mm-hmm.
It awakens much more possibility, and much more attention to the journey and the guides and allies that one can encounter on the journey.
Mm.
When you tend to read trouble and obstacle as simply pathological, then you're in need of then you're in need of healing,
Mm-hmm.
And you may completely be able to avoid the descent. It'll circle back around.
Mm-hmm.
So these periods of descent can show up in our lives in many different ways. Indigenous cultures had initiatory passages and rites of passages as a way to awaken through these challenging experiences, awaken connection to soul, awaken connection to responsibility for community. And again, when I say the word community, I mean human and non-human, living and non-living in that context.
Mm-hmm.
So that these wounded places that we all carry become places of initiatory responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Before then, they're simply places of woundology that we can keep focusing on, and it will cause us to walk backwards in life. As my teacher Rockenberry used to say, when you just focus on the wounds more than you need to, you just end up walking backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go into these initiatory wounds from the mythological landscape, you encounter a turning, an initiatory experience that brings you back to the middle world with responsibility for healing.
Mm-hmm.
So it shifts it that way.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes any sense.
Yes, it does. You know, and I'm struck as I appreciate so much what you're saying, and the idea that going toward the trouble rather than away from the trouble is the way to start to make the descent. And I do know that in our culture, and certainly often in our nervous systems, wherever the trouble is, that's where we just want to back up and go away rather than understand the invitation that it offers us to awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really love the idea of thinking of that mythologically, that is the invitation now to understand that an awakening is inviting us to happen.
Right.
When you talk about going down to the river, can you say more about that, about what you mean by that?
So I'm using the river as that archetypal or mythological realm of descent.
Uh-huh.
In the story I'm getting ready to share with you in a bit, there is a descent into the river.
Okay.
As I said earlier, initiatory processes of water are those of descent in soul and memory and healing, both in this world and for the ancestral world.
Mm-hmm.
And initiation by fire is one of ascent.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I use the term river or water, just to reference the realm, the lower world realm in which we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. So, and you'll have to help me track the time. I have no idea where we are in the time of things for this story that I'm gonna share in a minute.
We're about 24 minutes into the interview, and we can go 45 minutes to an hour. So we're just about getting close to midway. So
this might
you
be a good
decide
time.
when you want to do the story.
Yeah, this is probably a great time to do it.
Okay.
In terms of having set the landscape of context for it.
Okay. Lovely.
So this is a story that, in my understanding, Lawrence van der Post dug out of the ground in Nubia, in Africa. I think it's in the central Sudan, maybe southern Egypt. It's an African story of initiation and descent. It's called The Nubian Woman. And so he was one of the first people that I'm aware of that brought it back from that culture. I got it from Angelus Arian. So that's the lineage of the story that has come to me. And as sometimes storytellers will do, the beginning part of this story and the ending part of this story is something that has evolved as it's moved through me. So if you're familiar with the story, you may not know these parts to it that I was given to add to the front end and the back end.
Okay.
So that's the story. That's the medicine story, and that's the lineage from which it came and to me. And so why don't I get oriented here with the drum a little bit, and we can check sound. And,
We're going on a journey now into the storytelling from deep in the heart of Africa through Kedar.
Okay, let's. And I tend to, when I tell the story, I do tend to speak up loud. Can you see my head?
Yes.
Can you see the drum?
Can see the drum and can see the head, not quite. I mean, not quite fully.
Okay.
There we go. That's good.
Okay, I'm going to give you a little intro, and you can tell me if the sound for the intro is good.
Okay, and those of you in the chat, if you are having any trouble, just let us know now.
I'll tell you a story, and before I tell you this story, there's something important to know about stories. In Africa, they consider stories to be living and breathing entities. They're not fixed constructs of meaning. And so the life of a story and your relationship to the story changes. And that's why with medicine stories, you can hear a medicine story 100 times and your relationship to it will reorient itself. And as I learned from Angelus Arian, some of the important pieces about storytelling is not to understand the meaning of a story. In Africa, they say if you understand the meaning of a story, the story is dead. It has nothing more to offer you. So rather than looking for meaning, I want you to notice where in the story do you show up for the first time. So I may start the story and I may be into it a minute or two, and then all of a sudden there's something about a birth or a circle of warriors or a river hag, and you're in. And you didn't hear what came before it, but now you're in the story. There's something at that moment that's important for you that called you into the story. The other place to notice in the story is where in the story does your attention stop and the story keeps moving. And you stayed back down at the bottom of the river, and now I'm back at the village, and you didn't hear anything after that, and you're still down there at the bottom of the river. So where in the story does your attention stop and hang out? That's another important piece to notice in the story. And then the other place of a story, the other threshold spot of a story is where in the story does your attention leave the story? And when it leaves, where does it go? And what happens there? And so these three places in stories, what I call the medicine thresholds of a story that have the most to offer you. And these places will change over, again, you can hear a story 100 times and these things will shift and change in the story throughout your life. And so that's the essence of a story as a living and breathing entity.
Okay.
It's about relationship, not about what it means or the moral of the story.
Great.
So let's do a little bit of a test here. Can you see me and can you hear me okay? Those of you in chat world, let Taria know that the mix is good, my voice is good, you can hear the drum. How's that sounding out there?
Sounds like it's good. Yep, everybody's got you. They're hearing it.
And we're going down.
Yeah, keep your voice up as you go.
So as they say, once upon a time, or once below a time, or once sitting in front of your computer somewhere in the world, listening to somebody tell a story in a place that you think is in time. There was a village. Now, this village existed a long, long time ago. Some say it was so long ago it was older than the pine needles on the trees. This village existed a long, long way from where you are and where I am. Some say it was so far from here, it was further east than the sun and further west than the moon. And in that place and in that time, there was a village. And at that village, there stood a circle of warriors, shoulder to shoulder, facing outwards around the lodge. Within that circle of warriors, standing shoulder to shoulder, facing outwards around the lodge, inside that lodge sat a circle of grandmothers facing inwards. And within that circle of grandmothers was a woman bringing new life into her village. Outside this lodge could be heard sounds of drumming and singing and prayers of gratitude to the ancestors, prayers of gratitude for this new life coming into this village. For they knew that this new life coming into the village was bringing a gift, was bringing medicine that they needed. And soon could be heard sounds coming out of that lodge, sounds of deep breathing and grunting. The way you hear sounds of deep breathing and grunting when a woman is bringing new life into her village. And as lightning touched the ground, the cries of this infant girl child could be heard in the village. And as she opened her mouth to speak about this gift that she had brought these people, all that came out were cries. So she knew that she would wait and learn the language of her people, and then she would speak about why she had come. For she had remembered those agreements she had made with her ancestors before coming here about the gift that she was bringing. Yet as time was habit, one moon stretched into the next, and one season stretched into the next. And with that stretching came forgetting. Forgetting about those agreements. Forgetting about that connection to the world of the ancestors. Generally happens around 4 or 5 or 6 years old in this world, where we start to forget. So with that forgetting, something else began to set in, was a longing for connection, to belong. For the connection and the belonging to the world, for the ancestors from which she had come, had faded. And what was left in it was place with this desire to connect, to belong, to be part of something. And so as she grew up in this village, forgetting set in, and she began to notice things. She began to notice there seemed to be a lot of fear in this village. There seemed to be a lot of turmoil. People seem to have forgotten their connection to the ancestors, forgotten how to be grateful, forgotten their connection to creation. And the longing in her to belong, to fit in, grew even deeper until it grew into a sorrow. And as is often the case, those things we feel on the inside begin to get mirrored to us on the outside. And so the other girls in the village would soon begin to ignore her, exclude her, and tease her. And hurt and the disconnection grew even wider within this young girl's heart. And the other girls in the village would sometimes whisper behind her back, making fun of her, continuing to exclude her. So eventually she grew to that place of betwixt and between. You know, that place in your life where you're no longer in the place that you were, but you're not yet in the new place. Place of betwixt and between. You know, some say it happens around 13, 14. Or we could say 21, or 31, or 41, or 51, or 61. That place of betwixt and between when you're no longer where you were, but yet not in the new place. So she had grown to this place. And one day she walked down to the river and paused at the edge of the wood line. And there, looking down at the river, she saw the other girls down there playing and washing, painting, making tools and drums, telling stories, and just generally having fun with each other. And she noticed something that was very peculiar. She noticed that none of the girls down by the water were wearing their necklace. And she knew this was odd because you never took off your necklace. Your necklace spoke of your clan. It spoke of where you belonged in the village. And whether you were in the fire clan or the water clan or the mineral clan or nature clan or earth clan. And yet there it was. None of them had their necklaces on, and she fingered her necklace around her neck, looking at this. And at that moment, the desire to fit in had overcome the desire to be authentic. And she stepped out of the woods, walking down toward the river bank, toward the other girls, saying, "Where have you put your necklace? I will put mine there too, and I will join you." Well, one of the girls stepped forward and said, "Well, we took our necklaces off and we threw them into the river, make an offering to the spirit of the river." And upon hearing this, the girl remembered something her grandmother had told her about how to listen to the spirit of the river, and she did not question this. So she, being who she was, walked over to that river and took off that necklace. She said prayers of gratitude for her ancestors, prayers of gratitude for her life, and without hesitation, she threw that necklace out over the water. And down, down, down beneath the surface it went. And at that moment, the other girls began to circle around her, laughing at her, teasing her, pushing her, saying, "You fool! You fool! Did you think we would be so naive as to throw our necklaces in the river? What were you thinking?" Teasing her and laughing her, pushing her down in the dirt beside the water, leaving her there. There with tear-stained cheeks, lying in the dirt. She slowly picked herself up, feeling that deep cut of betrayal, maybe the betrayal of her own discernment. And she began to walk upstream, walking upstream into a night of questions and memories. Memories and questions. And she walked a long way into that night of questions and memories. Some say she walked all the way from 13 years old to 20, or 20 to 30, or 30 to 40, or 40 to 50, or 50 to 60, or 60 to 70. She walked a long time. We don't know how long she walked, but we do know it was a long time. Because the night was long and it was dark. And somewhere in the early morning hours of that dark night, around the dream star time of morning, that around 3 a.m. time, she heard a sound bubbling up from the river itself. It said, "Plunge in," the river said. And she paused. And She moved closer to the water, and she heard it again, plunge in, the river says. And remembering once again the stories of her grandmother that told her about the spirit of the river, she walked even closer to the river, and standing on that rock out over the water, she said prayers of gratitude for her life, prayers of gratitude for the lives of her ancestors, and being who she was, without hesitation, she jumped. And down, 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 down beneath the surface she went. And as the silt settled on the bottom of that river, the way silt settles when it's been disturbed on a river bottom, the water eventually clears. And as the water cleared, she looked, and some 30 yards away, she could see a faint firelight. And as she walked closer to that firelight, she could now see that there was an old woman sitting by the fire, stirring the coals with a stick, keeping them hot. And she studied this old woman for a bit. And then she stepped into the firelight around the old woman and looked at the old woman. And the old woman stirring those coals and keeping her hot, this old river hag looked up at her, looked into her, looked through her, as if she could see all the way down this girl's ancestry, and simply said to this girl, "Lick my wounds." And at that moment, the girl noticed that this old woman had cuts and wounds and bruises and sores oozing all over her body. Now this girl knew that she was not in the ordinary world anymore. She was at the bottom of a river, and there was a fire, and there was an old river hag that she had encountered. This indeed was not the ordinary world. So she stepped even closer to the old river hag. And once again, the old river hag said, "Lick my wounds." And trusting the stories of her grandmother, she stepped forward, and she picked up the arm of the old river hag and began to lick those oozing sores and wounds. She began to tend to those wounds. And it was very faint at first, like a small light that began to grow inside the belly of the old woman. But it got brighter and brighter and brighter until it filled the full body of this old woman and began to come to the surface of this old woman's skin. And those wounds, those cuts, those bruises, they began to heal. This light began to heal those wounds as the girl licked the wounds. And now the old woman, the old river hag, her eyes shine bright with fire and light. And she stood up, towering above this girl. Now looking down at this child, this girl, she reached out and she scooped this girl up in her arms. Now this girl, not familiar with this kind of fierce intimacy, began to squirm a little bit. And the old river hag held fast with fierce compassion. And you see this squirming began to turn into a bit of frustration. See, the girl wasn't comfortable with this. As frustration turned into anger, and as anger turned into rage, the old river hag, she held fast. And the girl began to rage and scream, and so much anger, so much rage began to pour forth from this girl, so much that the surface on the river that day bubbled on top with all the rage that had been released. And the girl herself did not know where it was all coming from. Maybe it was not all hers. Maybe it was from the long lineage of ancestors before her. Rage that had never been released, never been acknowledged, now being released at the bottom of this river. And soon the bubbling on top of the river began to settle, and the rage began to turn to anger, and back to anger to frustration, and frustration back to annoyance. And the annoyance settled down, and the girl was quiet. And the old river hag still held on fast to this young girl. And the girl became very quiet and still. And then there was 1, and 2, and 3, and then hundreds and hundreds of thousands of tears began to pour forth from this girl. And she began to wail and lament and lament and wail. And the old river hag continued to hold fast with fierce compassion to this child. And she wailed so much that day that the level of water on the river rose 3 feet that day. And the girl herself did not know where all this grief was coming from. Maybe it was not all hers. Maybe it was coming from the lands of her ancestors themselves. Maybe the very land itself. But you know the way grief sometimes sits beneath anger, just waiting for that anger to be released so the grief can have a pathway out. Well, that's what was happening down at the bottom of this river. And soon the level of the river began to settle back down. And the wailing and the lamenting quieted into soft tears. And the soft tears came to a stop. And now the girl was feeling completely free and light. Still the old river hag holding her, and now gently setting her down. And she looked up at it, the old river hag, wanting to say something, but can't quite form words yet. Wanting to say something of gratitude to the old river hag. But before she could utter a word, there was a sound in the river. She said, "What's that?" The old river hag said, "That's the river demon. Quick, into this lodge." And she looked over beside of her, and there was an earthen lodge, and the old river hag raised the flap on the lodge. And the girl went in, and she closed the flap. And up came the river demon. The river demon said, "I smell the blood and the bones of someone in my river, and I want them. They belong to me." And the old river hag laughed and said, "You'll never catch her. She's long gone. I think she left yesterday, and she went into the east. Well, wait a minute. No, it was 2 days ago, and she went west. Well, maybe it was about a week ago she was here, but she left here running fast in some direction, and you'll have to hurry if you're going to catch her." And the river demon with that took off into the west. That moment, the old river hag raised a flap on the lodge, and the girl came out. Once again, the girl now standing beside the old river hag, looking up at her, wanting to offer gratitude for the healing, gratitude for the protection. And before she could utter a word, the old river hag simply clapped her hands. And out of the river she came, landing on the river bank. This woman landed. Feeling a little unsteady as the woman began to stand, the way you feel a little unsteady when you've been in that other world, trying to remember something about who you are, trying to remember something about the medicine that you carry, that you brought here for your people. But she did stand, and she stood strong and clear in her womanhood. And deep beneath the river, there was another thunderous clap. And out of the river came a necklace. And this necklace landed in the dirt beside the river, beside the woman. And the woman looked down at this necklace, and she saw that this necklace had stones and jewels and metals and bones. and was ornate in such a way that had never been seen before in this land. It wasn't from this land. And once she saw this necklace, this woman knew that this was her medicine that she had retrieved. And she picked it up and she put it on. And she began to make her way back towards her village. And as she made her way back towards her village, she soon heard sounds of the girls down at the river again. Now, she didn't know how long she'd been gone. Could have been a few days. Maybe just long enough for rehab. Could have been years. Could have been decades. But at any rate, she appeared back at that village, and there down at the river were girls playing down by the water. She studied them for a moment, and then she stepped out of the woods, walking down toward the river, and they turned toward her, and the first thing that caught their eye was this incredible necklace that they had never seen before. And they said, "Where did you get that necklace? We want one of those." And being who she was, she simply said, "I got this necklace from the spirit of the river, from the old river hag at the bottom of that river." And they said, "Well, we want one of those necklaces. We're going to get one." And they began to run toward the river. And she said, "Wait." But it was too late, and they had already jumped. And down, down, down to the bottom they went. And as the silt settled on the bottom of that river, those girls looked across, and some 30 yards away, they could see a faint firelight. And as they neared that firelight, they could see that sitting by this fire was an old woman stirring the coals and keeping them hot. They stepped into the firelight saying, "Old woman, where can we get one of those necklaces?" Well, the old river hag wasn't one much for answering questions, you know. She said, "Lick my wounds," is all she said. "Old river hag, we want one of those necklaces." "Lick my wounds," the old river hag said. And at that moment, the girls noticed this old river hag had cuts and wounds and bruises and oozing sores all over her body. And I said, "Old woman, you're gross. We're not touching you. We want one of those necklaces. That's what we're here for." And again, she said, "Lick my wounds." "Old woman, you're nasty." And they turned their back on the old woman and began to walk away. And then there was a sound in the river. They turned around quickly saying, "What's that? What's that? What's that?" And the old river hag said, "Oh, that's the river demon. You girls better run now, because I think he smells you down here. I think he smells you down in this river, so you better start running." And they took off running. And the river demon followed. Now, some say they're still down there running into lives of compulsions and addictions, obsessions, running into lives of distractions and depression and anxiety, running into lives of entertainment and consumerism. Down there running, still running from that demon, afraid to tend to those wounds. But back in that village, there walked a woman. A woman strong in her purpose, her identity, and her medicine. And this woman built her lodge on the perimeter of this village because she knew something from early on about living on the outside. But this time, she built it from a place of vigilance. From this vantage point, she could see all the children, she could see everyone in the village from where she had built her lodge. And she would watch those ones in the village, and as she saw that they were ready, she would one by one take them down to the river and teach them how to listen to the spirit of the river. Now, some would walk away from that river muttering something about not hearing anything. But we know what they heard, even if they pretended not to hear it. Others would go down to that river with the old woman, and then they would disappear and never return. Maybe they're still down there running from that river demon. And yet others would go down to the river with the Nubian woman and disappear into the river, and then some weeks or months or even years later, a woman would appear in the village with something that was desperately needed, a teaching, a healing. And so went the life of this Nubian woman. Now you may say, Kedar, that was an interesting story, but didn't you tell me that was a long, long time ago in a place far, far from here? There aren't villages like that anymore. There aren't people willing to do that anymore. And if that were so, we probably wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. So maybe it's not so. And maybe this is that village, the one you're sitting in right now. Maybe this is that place. Listen right now. Plunge in, the river says. Plunge in. I'm going to get a little up in here where you can hear me and see me a little better. Okay. So again, that's a story name is The Nubian Woman that was handed off to me from Angeles Arian. I think she got it from Lawrence Vanderpost and from that country in Africa. Actually known for their the honor and respect of the feminine. It seems to be a good story to tell these days.
I feel like I'm guessing most of us do, like I'm just waking up from a dream, just like, wow, you really took us into the dream time. What an amazing adventure we just had with you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wow. And I imagine people will start to, as we shake off the sleep of the dream and find ourselves on the shore and awake again, we'll have things to say to one another and during the chat, and also questions to ask. I'll say in terms of my entry or, really potent place in the dream to me was the lick my wounds. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about what I know I've heard you talk about before about Joanna Macy's thing about the pain.
Right.
And that's what I was feeling when I was saying before, is like we tend to go away from trouble, but I guess what I meant really there was pain.
Right.
We tend to go away from the pain. It's hard to go into it to really know that that's the entry. So
just to say something about that piece and recognition of a great elder and a great eco-philosopher activist, Joanna Macy. Mm-hmm. In a recent video that I was watching with her in it, she made the comment, she said, I used to think it was greed and ignorance that has gotten us to this place of global destruction of our ecosystems and climate balancing. She said, I don't think that anymore. I think that it is the avoidance of pain. And that spoke so significant to me about the initiatory journey of descent and the unwillingness to really look at the pain that is out there in terms of clear cutting and ecosystem destruction and I want to also say it's important not to demonize the other. Mm-hmm. The logger who's clear cutting. I invite you to get to know this man and his family because he's just trying to feed his kids.
Mm-hmm.
We can't demonize each other. There's no solution in that.
Mm-hmm.
We have to find the ground, as Rumi says, a ground out beyond right doing and wrong doing, where we can meet. And the places of those initiatory descents open the heart and open the compassion. And I believe those are places of connection. So that we can become aware, heartfully aware of the state of things with each other and also our greater community of the non-human. And in the indigenous perspective, calling on the ancestral helping spirits to guide and assist. And given that this is a global online interview, I do want to make a distinction. When I say ancestral helping spirits, I don't mean that being dead qualifies one for an ancestor, no more than being alive qualifies one to be healthy and well. In indigenous world and reality, there's a division between death and arrival in a realm of ancestors where you then become helpful to the living. And so just want to make that distinction for those who might recoil when they think about their dead relatives as like, I didn't like them, now I certainly don't want to call on them for help. And I'm talking about something else. So that again, indigenous world, there is a realm greater compassionately loving beyond that.
Right.
And then our own connections to the sacred and whatever tradition that we're in, to lean into that and look for connection and relationship. I think the answers lie in relationship. If we don't have relationship, then we'll not find answers.
Right.
We'll find judgments and projections. There's one thing to have relationship with the land around you, even in your immediate surroundings, but also to get to the place where the land itself has relationship to you. So it's just not something framed from an eco-centric mindset of, oh yeah, I know this place, I know this land. And I would say, does the land know you? Does the mockingbird that travels this particular area every afternoon as the sun's starting to set, does it know you? Does that being know you? Because that's relationship.
I remember one day taking a walk right near here where I live, and the words entered my mind like words from the great beyond, and it said, it's all about relationship. And that's all there was. And I knew that whatever it is, it's all about relationship, that really is the central core of what is. It's all about relationship.
And relationship to ourselves. One time listening to my teacher, Will Rockingbear, talking to a group of people, and somebody said, there's so much violence in the world. What do we do? And he said, you got to stop the violence. And he paused, and then he said, I'm talking about the violence that we all do to ourselves in our own head. We got to start there. The first revolution is the one inside ourselves.
Absolutely.
And so we stop that violence. And then from there out.
Right. So, Kedar, I think we'll move to the chat very quickly, but I would love to hear you just give a few closing remarks about what you're talking about in your topic about the great turning I know that your sense is that this is a really important time right now, this moment, and how that relates to the rewilding. So just a few comments on that, I think, would be really lovely before we move into opening up the conversation.
So yeah, the title that I chose for this, The Reawakening of the Indigenous, the Rewilding of Human Nature, and the Great Turning.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm reminded briefly of this study of the wolves in Yellowstone and the reintroduction of wolves back into Yellowstone after they had been exterminated. And then they put them back into Yellowstone some 20 some years ago. And then they began to study again the environment and realized that the course of a river had changed and that everything in the entire ecosystem had changed and literally the environment. Mm-hmm. And then they spoke about this term in science they call trophic cascade, that when you take the top predator out of its ecosystem, the way wolves were hunted to extinction or other great predatory animals were removed because we didn't want them there, it disrupts the entire system itself. Everything underneath that predator, even the land itself, is disrupted. And I began to think about that, and I thought, well, the top predator animal on the planet is we are. And since we have extracted ourselves from the connection to the, say, the web of our environment, the web of our greater community, and set ourselves apart, we have pulled out the top predator. And so no wonder there's so much global catastrophe in ecosystems and climate systems and monetary systems and all these systems of natural balancing and systems of operation have been altered. And I thought, well, the answer really is in the rewilding of human nature. Uh-huh. And it begins with, getting school children back into nature. Mm-hmm. Even, we start with the young people, and I'm a big fan of working with adults so that the young people have something to go back to. But beginning to reconnect relationally, to make connection and relationship back to our natural world, to understand it, to take a course that gives one more understanding of their relationship to the natural world and its relationship to us. Initiatory passages serve that reawakening and rewilding in a ritual or ceremonial way. Yes. And there are gentler ways. Mm-hmm. If that's not something immediately on your radar, there are gentler ways of just beginning to know that the word community refers to the human and non-human, and get to know the other than human world around you. Mm-hmm. And you'll notice amazing patterns of connection and relationship. So that's a brief way to speak about how those things link together.
Well, thank you so much, Kedar. I'm really looking forward to hearing from the others who have been listening. Jocelyn's with us, and she's going to come in and lead the chat since she has the technology for pulling people in. So if you want to start thinking about what you might like to say and raising your hand, let's see Jocelyn, and she will help us with the next phase of this amazing opportunity we're having with Kedar.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Kedar. That was amazing. That was really, really wonderful and beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with all of us. I'm so touched by so many parts of this conversation. I'm not even sure which one to draw out right now. So we'll leave it to the audience because it was just really wonderful. I do want to say one thing, just to reemphasize one item you said just a minute or two ago, Kedar, about getting the school children back into nature. I think that is just absolutely critical. Well, I think we can all agree it's critical for our future, and something that any little part of that any of us can play, whether it's with our own children or grandchildren or nieces or nephews, or getting involved in, creating after school programs for kids to do that. I just encourage anyone who's inspired around that to go out and take action, because it is so, so important. Mm-hmm. So let's open up the Q&A. Oh, and one more thing though, I do want to announce Kedar's free gift to everybody. Mm-hmm. So would you like to say a few words, Kedar, about what you're offering, and then I'll let everybody know how they can access it.
Okay. Well, it's a couple of free gifts, and one is if you sign up for the newsletter, you'll automatically get the free gift of another audio story that I'm telling called Singing Stone. And I'll say this is a story that was passed on to me from Stephen Foster and Meredith Little at School Lost Borders many years ago. I think it was given to him from an anonymous Native American source. But the name of the story is Singing Stone. And if you sign up for the newsletter, you'll automatically get that story. The other is if you sign up for the newsletter, you'll be entered into a drawing for a free 30-minute divination. And if you're curious about divinations, you can go to my website and click on the Retreats button, and then you'll see a button for divination. I'll tell you what that is and what that's about. So for free drawing for divination, and then the free audio story.
Okay, wonderful. And Kedar, you had mentioned before we started that if anybody did not want to sign up for your newsletter, but they did want to be entered in the drawing for free divination, that possibly they could email you.
Yes, if you'd rather not sign up for the newsletter and get the free audio story, you can just email me directly by going to my website and hit the contact button. I'll show you how to email me through there.
Okay.
So my address is my name, Kedar@kedarbrown.com. The spelling is a little different than it sounds. That's why I recommended going to the website.
Okay, wonderful. And so for everyone listening live now, I just posted the link to Kedar's website, and above that slightly the link to sign up directly for his free gift. And so for anyone who's listening to this as a recording, if you just scroll down a little bit below where this video is, then you'll be able to see the link to register for those things as well. So thank you for offering those, Kedar.
Yes.
Okay, so I will open it up now for anyone to raise your hand if you would like to ask Kedar a question. And I really, really encourage you not to be shy, to really take advantage of this opportunity to speak with Kedar, because he is such a wealth of knowledge, and really, really wonderful to have him here. You can post your questions in the chat or in the Q&A box, and I will get to those as well. But I want to encourage everyone to raise your hand, and we're going to prioritize the questions if people raise their hands, because we just love to talk with you and see your smiling faces out there in the world. Okay, well, to get things warmed up, then let's go with this question that was put in the Q&A box. Tom has asked, how can I distinguish my pain from the pain of my ancestors and or the pain of the world? That's a big question.
Yeah, I would say in ritual, it's not necessary to distinguish, and that the pain, because you already connected ancestrally and you're connected to the environment. Some people have particular connections and relationships, say, to trees or to rivers, and they'll source and become an expression of the pain that's embedded in the landscape. In terms of your ancestral blood lineage ancestry, in terms of that pain, it would be good to do what's called lineage clearing work. Matter of fact, if you're interested in that, I would watch the very next show that's coming up with a friend of mine, Daniel Four. He's going to talk more about that. But the understanding that the turmoil of the dead becomes the turmoil of the living until their healing happens for them. And so doing lineage clearing work, or if you have folks that do that kind of work on your behalf, can work with you in that way. But that would be important to do, to really look and see, because you don't want the turmoil of the unresolved dead kind of filtering over into your life and then becoming your emotions and your feelings and your struggles. So one of the things when I do divinations with people or work with people is I always look into the line and to what needs healing there. because whatever needs healing there is already creating trouble here. And so that's kind of the first place to look.
Okay, thank you very much, Kedar. So we do have someone raising their hand. So Ibtisam, let me bring you over to talk with us.
Oh, person great.
Here. Okay, there we go. We should be able to hear you now, Ibtisam. Welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, thank you for the wonderful story. It was really lovely. I think the part which I really resonated with, I mean, there were many parts, but one particular one is when you talked about when she goes down in the river and all the rage and everything starts coming up, and she recognizes it, and as that happened, she recognizes this is not even my own. So in a way, the question which you've just answered sort of answers my question. But I think that's the part which I really identified, because for me, this whole journey, which at least for over a year, which I've been experiencing, and a lot of the emotions which I feel, for the longest time, I eventually did reach that conclusion that these are not mine. I don't even think it's, sometimes I think it's like for all the women in the world. It sounds really crazy when I'm saying that, but the kind of stuff that's bodily I've experienced wise, and it's just quite crazy. So, and then when you said it settles, the emotion, it became less like from the rage, and how it sort of went down stages, and I kind of really understood that as well. But then it again erupts, and then again she says, "Oh my God, one more," and I think that's what really drew me on. That was my hope in the story, anyway.
So just a comment about grief. Can y'all hear me or see me?
Yes.
Okay. Grief, like in grief rituals, one of the things I do is grief ritual experiences that last several days. But a grief ritual is food for the spirits. You have to think of grief not as personal turmoil, but as a collective offering for healing. So as certainly the grief that moves through us at those deep levels is not all our own, because it starts to heal and give voice to and expression to grief that has not been expressed. And so the way to think about grief, who's it? Martin Prechtel talks about grief and praise as being the same thing. And so grief, I think of grief as food for the spirits. And grief is not a personal dilemma. It's a collective responsibility of offering. And so grief rituals and expressions of grief are ways to heal and feed the spirits at the same time we heal and help them heal.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ibtisam. Have a wonderful day. Hope you can join us for the next two interviews.
Yeah, I'm hoping to. Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Jasmine. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for being on. Bye-bye.
Okay. Does anybody else want to raise your hand and speak with Kedar? Now's your chance. Don't be shy.
That's right. Some of you out there that I know are watching, jump in.
Plunge in.
No pressure at all. All right, here's someone, Kari or Carrie, not sure if I'm saying your name right. Welcome over. Okay, welcome. We should be able to see and hear you now, Kari.
Okay.
Oh,
you can
actually,
hear me all right?
we can't see you, but we can hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I would appreciate hearing, Kedar, you speak more to letting the path find us.
Mm.
The medicine you carry, when you become separate from it, it begins to stalk you the way that you are looking for it. It's like you're looking for each other. But you have to be still enough, eliminate distractions, and deep listening, so that those things can find you. It's so that the ground of the what I call the ground of the creative, or the ground of the mystery can find you if you make yourself available to it. So efforting, it's kind of like if you say, well, being a seek is kind of the antithesis of ever finding anything, because you have to be seeking. So it's more like stillness, deep listening, heartfulness. Gratitude is a great ingredient for opening awareness. Paying attention, just really paying attention, and deep listening. But eliminating distractions and getting quiet are key to so it can find you. Spending time in nature. My teacher used to said the three most important things. This is another Rocking Bear-ism. He said, "You know what the three most important things is?" And I said, "What are they?" He said, "Pay attention, pay attention, pay attention." It took 15 years before I knew what he meant. He was not being redundant. He was talking about the Toltec tradition of attention, and that there's the ordinary consciousness attention. And then there's, once you master the awareness of tracking ordinary consciousness, you separate yourself from it so that then you can watch it. And then the third level of attention is when you're completely present in the moment. You're not even aware of tracking and paying attention to anything. You're just completely present. So this idea of attention and presence and relationship. And it doesn't matter where you are, what situation you're in. You don't have to be sitting in front of a candle or up on top of a mountain. You just open your awareness, open your heart, and listen. It'll be right there in front of you.
Thank you so much. Very resonant.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And thank you, Kari. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Blessings.
Okay, we have two more hands raised now. So Nikki, I will bring you over now, and then Gail will be next. Okay, welcome, Nikki. We should be able to hear you. I can't see you though.
Hi.
There you are. Hi. Welcome.
Oh, wow. Wow. I feel a bit nervous.
Nervous. We're all in this together.
But I think it's really the time now to jump in and not say no and do things, because we only have now.
Yes.
So it feels like there's a real energy in this spring and to really move forward and make things happen. But I just want to say thank you to Kedar. That was amazing. And I watched that with my 14-year-old daughter. And I think these stories are so important for our children. Most importantly, I really resonated with what you said about our children needing to be in the wild. They don't need rules and regulations, and they don't need telling what to do, because they know it and they just need to be able to remember it. So it feels like a really important time in our lives. Incredible that we can actually all be here. We don't have to fly to a conference venue and sit in a stuffy conference hall. I can make food and wander around, and I really think that this new way of being with technology and using technology as a tool, but not letting it take over our lives, and finding a balance and knowing when to turn the phone off and actually connect, because it's such a distraction. And I think, sorry, I feel like I'm on a blurt, but
well, please tell your 14-year-old daughter you said.
yeah, in fact, I think what I want to say is that this is what makes us happy. Because this is having things like a paintbrush in your hand and expressing. And I've just started painting this week for the first time in my life, and actually standing in front of an easel and just churning out 30 years of blocked, I can't paint, other people can paint. And it's just like, wow, come into the present moment, as you said, and really be present, turn off the phone, say no to people.
I have a message for your 14-year-old daughter, but don't put her on the screen.
No,
no 14-year-old wants to be seen globally.
Sorry, it was more the fact she was painting.
Well, just let her know that the importance of never letting fitting in become greater than being herself.
Indeed, indeed, and that part of the story of your story it's wonderful for me to sit there and hear it from where I am in the river and where she is on the journey, and it's such an empowering story for young women. So thank you. Thank you.
Take good care, Nikki.
Thank you so much. Love you lots. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Nikki. I love the snake painting, that 3-piece painting behind you with the snake in it. That's really beautiful.
Thank you. There we go.
Really cool.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to say before I go, thank you for organising this. I've shared it with some very special people in my tribe who will then resonate. So here in Yorkshire, in cold Yorkshire, UK, we're all experiencing this with you as well. Thank you.
Good. I'm so glad. So glad. Thank you for your kind words.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Nikki. Have a wonderful day.
You too, darling. Bye. Bye.
Okay. Oh, we have lots of hands raised. Wonderful. Kedar, let me know if you are schedule wise, if you are able to continue for a few more callers. Is that?
I can. I'm fine.
Okay. So Gail, who I know is there in Asheville with where you both are located, is up next. So welcome, Gail. Let me bring you over. And then we have Nicola and Victoria coming up next. Hi, Gail. We should be able to hear you now. We can't see you.
Hi.
There you are.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is a wonderful summit. I'm excited to ask this question because I also sat in circle with Rocking Bear years ago. And he said in that circle, when the song comes, sing it. And just a year or so after that, I started waking up with songs just in my head. And just this past Friday, I woke up with a song about the river that really resonated with the story about the river. But I write these songs out, I throw a line on the recorder on the phone and I go back to sleep and wake up with another line and I throw them all on there. And I'm wondering if you have any suggestions on what to do with these songs that come besides sing them, how to get them out in the world. I'm personally homebound, so I can't take them out in the world, but if you have any suggestions, I would love to hear what you might suggest.
So some songs, I've heard some songs called calling songs. They often come to people as they're approaching an initiatory passage. A calling song essentially calls you into the medicine you carry, calls you into more of who you are at this time in your life. Some songs are to be sung for other people. Some songs are simply to be sung that you have relationship with. and then they may become medicine songs that you use if you do healing work. They may become a medicine song. But the nature of the relationship to the song, to communicate with the song itself as an entity of relationship with you. So it's not to think of a song like a story. It's a living entity that has come to you. And so you enter into relationship with it and ask those questions. How are we to work together? How am I to be in relationship with you? What is it that you may be asking of me? And so you enter into relationship much the same way you enter into a relationship with a friend or a new friend. You're getting to know, and they're getting to know you. And so again, relationship is of key importance. I don't think there's anybody else that can tell you what to do with one of those songs but the song itself. And so I would deepen into that listening and guiding. I know Taria's into dreams, had an experience of a song, and some healers are called singers, by the way. I think in Navajo tradition, being a healer is sometimes referred to as a singer because songs carry medicine. Had just a quick dream one time where I was thinking about that concept. I had this dream about seeing these, standing in this house and seeing these ancestral spirits come to the door. And I walked outside because I knew they needed help getting across. So I started to rattle and pray. And then this other one came to the door that seemed lost. And when I went out, seemed to need help. And I got the message, sing, like the song. And so as I sang this song that came to me, it helped him transition. So songs are like medicine pieces. They'll have a very specific thing that they're about and what they want to work with. But I would ask the song.
Yeah, I do have, I have that experience with the songs. I carry the medicine songs and hold lodge ceremony here on my land on the mountain, and work with my Seleki ancestors. And one of the first songs that came to me was over a decade ago. It was my journey song, and it took me years to figure out what that was for, because nothing more came except the simple journey song. And I've been journeying with that one for a long time now, and really appreciate it. And the other songs that have come, and another question along these lines. My great-grandmother was full-blood Seleki, and she married a Scotsman who was the blacksmith. And I know the smithies, they called him in that time, carried the shamanic medicine as well. Do you know anything about your indigenous people of Scotland or their medicine or their shamanic ways?
Some, in terms of accessing the medicine from the landscape and their relationship to the land. Something that's just coming through to me as you talk, Gail, is I would invite you to consider yourself as someone who helps other people find their song. And so what's coming to me as you're speaking, that your relationship to songs is rich and offerings, but also as one who helps others find their song. That might be a turn in the trail that's happening for you right now, is to turn your attention toward helping other people listen for their song.
That's beautiful. Thank you so very much. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
It's sweet. The people who come to lodge ceremony. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
you for being on.
Yeah, thank you, Gail. And thank you,
Kate,
Kedar,
thank you,
for your
Jocelyn.
beautiful answer. All right. Have a wonderful day, Gail.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so we have Nicola and then Victoria. So welcome over, Nicola. Hi, welcome.
Hi. Hi,
Hello.
Jocelyn.
Hi.
I thought I'd dive in because after hearing that story, it just resonates with me so much about a dream that I woke up with this morning, which had a huge impact on me. But I did ask for a dream last night, which I don't usually do. So maybe that's why. But everything you were saying in the story just resonates. So I thought I'd dive in and share it because it's quite synchronistic. Basically, I was standing in the middle of a river, and I just felt this rage, and it didn't feel like my own. It felt like the rage of the earth and the water. And in front of me, to my right, a door, like a portal door, appeared, and an Oriental type doctor man walked through, and he wanted to anaesthetize me and the river. And all this rage and anger came up in me. I did not want to be numbed and anaesthetized. So I turned behind me, and there was a row of cubicle toilets with white doors. And I chose the one on the right, and I wanted to hide in there. But before I did, all this rage, I looked down to the river, and all this rage and sadness just rose up. And I woke up terrified and crying. And I looked at my cushion, and the cushion was black, and it looked like a dead black crow. And I've never felt such, deep emotion from a dream before. And I think there's a theme because I've been journaling for a while now, and there's been a lot of Oriental authoritarian male men in these dreams trying to suppress me and nature for some reason, even though I don't know anybody like that in real life. There seems to be that theme. When I started journaling these dreams, when I turned 35 back in December, 2 days after my birthday, I dreamt of a wise old woman, and she was just so happy to see me. And she wanted me to go to a craft fair and share medicine and crafts. And ever since then, I've been having these strong dreams, and also a dream of a drum, like the African drum you were playing. I dreamt that 2 nights ago. And a woman was sat to my right, drawing keys and doorways onto the drum. And I used to teach drumming many years ago, like 15 years ago. And she was drawing doorways and keys and interrupting me and saying, just showing me these symbols. But I just felt there was a powerful resonance from that story, especially with the river and the rage rising. That's exactly how I felt this morning. And it just felt like the feminine rising. But yeah, I feel that a lot of resonance there. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a very powerful dream or journey. I tend to look at dreams as actually you go somewhere as opposed to just a psychic flushing of residue. And so much to speak about there. I'll just speak to what I'm drawn to in your dream and in your comments. A lot of times people think of the elemental ancestors of, say, grandfather fire or water or mineral earth, nature. When they think of the elementals as holding judgment, in other words, they're angry or this is angry. The way I think about it is they actually have become repositories for the human turmoil, and they're holding it. One of the images I saw with down at the river and the crow and the grief, like in the story, is I would encourage you to explore your feminine line in terms of a specific. People often go to water to release grief, and water takes that grief, and shamans often use rivers and waters to deposit things because the water will take care of it. So if something's rising up out of the river like that, I have a sense it may literally be an ancestral lineage piece to explore some healing down that line for you.
Right.
That the water is showing you this, as opposed to the water itself being the one in grief. So it's just a way to think about it. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, it is. I also thought it might be a collective theme as well, sort of a collective feminine, suppression over the years, and it's suddenly just rising. It just felt like I was a channel for this, and it just rose up within me.
Yeah, and that it's, the individual connection or a lineage piece connection will always open to the collective if we stay on the trail.
Right.
But it may be that very lineage piece connection, because you saw it, then you become a tool, an ambassador for healing, not only the lineage, but also to bring healing to the collective, so that your grief becomes an outpouring of offering.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
To feed the spirits.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Welcome. Thanks for being on.
Thank you, Kedar, and thank you, Nicola, for sharing your dream. That's very powerful, and really synchronistic with Kedar's.
Yeah, I'm going to join the Dream Village and the Dream Symposium. I've signed up today, so.
Oh, good! Yay!
We're
delighted to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Wonderful.
Bye-bye.
Have a beautiful day.
And you too. Bye.
Thanks. Okay, we have one more raised hand here, and this is Victoria. So welcome over, Victoria. And there you are. We can see and hear you now. Welcome.
Hey, hi, Kedar.
Hey.
So I have heard this story many times, and what Kedar was saying about each time it's a medicine story. So each time you hear it, it teaches you something different. And I've come into the story so many different places, and over the times that I've heard this. And this time it was interesting. As I listened to the story, I felt just kind of a very calm sense through the whole thing. I felt like I stayed with the story. And the one place that I felt a little bit of a catch was the place where she is looking at the other women and they're playing together. And she says something like, "Tell me where you threw your necklaces, I'll join you." It was that line, "I will join you." And I just felt this little kind of seductive feeling that came in with that one, that lovely sense about belonging, And, but it didn't last very long, and it didn't have a big grab, but it was very subtle. And I thought, wow, that's just so interesting, that great human desire to belong, often even at the expense of ourselves, And then the other place that really caught me, or I felt, was after she had come out of the river and after the women had gone back and jumped into the river. And then there was this lightness of the drum where she's starting to move back into the village again. And there was this, I felt this just joy with that. So this particular story has been one, like I said, the first time I heard it was probably, I want to say 15 some years ago. And the impact has been so strong all the way along. And I'm just in awe of these medicine stories and how what the impact that they have and how it gets integrated into us, So that's just what I wanted to share, just this experience I've had of working with it and the depth experience that's come from it. So that's my offering. And it was funny because I didn't realize I raised my hand. I thought I lowered my hand. And then when I heard name, I was like, oh, I guess I'm supposed to say something. So that's why I thought, as right before I came on, I was like, well, I hope this is something, this is of value. So, I just kind of put whatever I'm supposed to say, let it be of value. So hopefully somebody out there is finding that helpful.
It is all meant to be, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Victoria.
And thank you, Kedar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Victoria. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks. Okay, beautiful. So I think with that, we will close. Kedar, do you have any last words of wisdom for us that you would like the audience to know before we close for the day?
So, deep listening, connection, relationship, slow down, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention.
That's an important one. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for everything that you have shared here today.
Yeah,
It has
thank
been
you, Jocelyn.
really
Thank you,
an honor
Taria.
to experience it.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Kedar. What an offering you've just made, and I'm so grateful to have been with you and part of it.
Yes, thank you for that.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So everyone listening, do sign back on at, let's see, at 1 p.m. New York time, when we will be speaking to Daniel Four. And his topic is partnering with our ancestors for personal, family, and cultural healing, which I'm sure is going to be another fantastic conversation. So we look forward to seeing you all then. And until then, have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Kedar. Thank you, Taria.